Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second in a series of webinars hosted by Space and Satellite Professionals International and its chapter in India. My name is Lou Zaccarella. I'm the Director of Innovation at SSPI, and I'm coming to you today from New York City. This event is produced in partnership with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and its U.S.-India Business Council, and as part of a United States-India dialogue on commercial space. Before we launch into the program, I'd like to just thank Jay Gullish of the USIBC for his work in helping to put this series together, as well as Sanjay Nakanti and Gagan Agrawal of NSR for their steady work. As you know, the USIBC has long been a champion for creating the policy environment and business ties to promote U.S.-India commercial space. And we hope that these webinars are a stepping stone to creating a dedicated focus on the innovative, fast-growing, and really fun elements of this relationship. So you can contact the SSPI India chapter for more information about future events. Now, for those of you who don't know about Space and Satellite Professionals International, or SSPI, we are the world's largest nonprofit trade association for professionals whose work in any way, shape, or form touches commercial space and satellite industry. And that means whether you're 5 years old or 95 years old, SSPI is the organization that touches this industry, educates, informs, provides networking, business contacts, and is a voice of the industry. We make the case for space and satellite. We fuel the engine of growth. We look for new markets, new developments across the world. So we invite you to learn more about our programs and also about our Better Satellite World initiative, which has produced videos that have gone viral around the world, as well as our podcasts with leaders in the industry. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that has kind of sprung itself on us. As you know, COVID-19 continues to upset the world order in shocking new ways. I think many of us have painfully come to realize that resilience and the global economic order and everyday routines for all of us here have become vulnerable to a single major healthcare event. Of course, we're hoping that until a vaccine or significant therapeutics arrive that we can manage. But as we try, there are larger issues emerging. For example, what happens to weather forecasting data when airplanes, which are a significant source of gathering data, cannot report on the weather? We need that. It is planning season in many parts of the world. Well, fortunately, satellites are picking up the slack there. But while the challenges of keeping civil society intact grow, there are also large opportunities ahead to make the world better and the economy less vulnerable through improvements in pharma, agriculture, and the intelligent management of cities and regions. So we'll be talking about a lot of that today. The questions we'll ask are, can we come out of this crisis better and the world by necessity more connected? So today we've invited three really eminent and very cool experts to explore this topic and to help us answer the question, what has been the space and satellite industry's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and what is happening in the commercial space sector as a result? Before I introduce these folks to you, however, I would like to show you a short video that promotes the interests of our industry and sets up our discussion today. So this is part of our Better Satellite World campaign, and we're going to look at it now. It's a couple of minutes long.
The lives we save are our own lives. The futures we build are our own futures. The possibilities we create are opportunities for a better world. The possibilities we create are the world's hope. The futures we build are the dreams of tomorrow. The lives we save are our own. Satellite, the world's invisible, indispensable technology. Brought to you by the Society of Satellite Professionals International, Arabsat, DataPath, RTEL, and the Space Connection.
And we'd like to thank them all for their contribution to that video. Okay, let me introduce our panel today because they've come from all around the world to be with us. First, Madhav Ragam is the Vice President for the Asia Pacific region for Maxar. Mr. Ragam has a stated goal, which you have to really embrace, which is for each of us to live in safe, secure, well-planned, healthy, and thriving cities and nations. Maxar and his role there is to work with governments and commercial clients toward the goal of using the company's high-resolution satellite imagery and processes. He has spent 25 years before this with IBM, where he worked with clients in critical industries, including those in healthcare. His achievements include developing a geographical information system for the government of India. He is a frequent speaker on transformational opportunities, and he's got his chance here today with COVID-19 going on. And I welcome Madhav here today. Welcome, sir. Abhishek Malhotra is the founding partner of TMT Law Practice. He has 2 decades of experience and is a member of the state bars of California here in the United States and Delhi, India. He has wide-ranging expertise in regulatory and policy litigation and advisory and intellectual property and commercial dispute resolution in industries that include tech, media, and telecom. He is known as the go-to professional on industry-level issues in our industry, satellite communication, aerospace, as well as music and sports. He is a regular guest lecturer at eminent institutions in his country in India and has contributed to books on space law, intellectual property, and doing business in India. And we welcome Abhishek with us today.
Thank you.
Yossi Yamin is the founder and chief executive of Space Pharma. Mr. Yamin is an entrepreneur and has been active in the commercial space business for the last 3 years. Space Pharma produces miniaturized laboratories designed to perform complex biological and chemical experiments in microgravity environments. Mr. Yamin has been recognized by CB Insights, Fast Company, and Red Herring, and has received many innovation-related prizes around the world. He has over 30 years experience working on large-scale development projects in the US, Israel, and Canada. He commanded the Israeli satellite unit, managed 7 successful launches, and participated in the plans for future satellite generation. Very good credentials, and we welcome Yossi to be with us here today. We also, by the way, have Tamara Bond Williams with us. She is monitoring Facebook for questions, and we will be checking in with her periodically because we know you will have many questions today. But first, I want to go to our panelists and officially welcome them on behalf of SSPI India. And I want to just maybe start off with Madhav. Where are you today? And tell us a little bit about where you are in your situation, because it's unique these days, and a little bit about what Maxar is up to in the Asia Pac region.
Yeah, sure. So I'm speaking to you all from Singapore, and things are very much in control in Singapore, even though the media doesn't make it out to be. Yes, there are hundreds of COVID cases that are reported on a daily basis, but they happen to be contained in specific dormitories that have been created for the foreign workers that have come to work in Singapore. So because of the congested living quarters that they have there, the cases are high. But if you look outside of that community, the cases have come down significantly. And in the last 2 or 3 days, it's been less than 5. And I know that today it was 2. So the Singapore government's strategy of using the circuit breaker seems to be working well. And what was interesting in the papers is that not only are the COVID cases coming down, but the common flu, cold, diarrhea, conjunctivitis, all of them have dropped significantly across all of Singapore.
Interesting.
So it was an interesting observation there. So that's where I am, and I'm happy to be here, safe and sound.
Very
So
good.
I'm delighted to be speaking to you all on behalf of Maxar, and I suppose a lot of people already know about Maxar, given that this is a satellite interest group. But in case somebody is not aware, the way I sum it up is that Maxar is into Earth intelligence and space infrastructure, right? Just in one sentence, that's how I would explain that. So there's lots of interesting things happening in the satellite world, as some of you would know, especially with the COVID situation and some of the measures that the governments are taking. Are they actually being implemented in the field the way the politicians are actually giving out in their speeches, right? Yes and no, depends on the country. Small, everything can be enforced. But if it's a larger country, are these social distancing practices really being followed? Yes, they've closed down the schools, but they may not have actually extended the same thing to some of the religious places of worship, etc., where people are still congregating in big groups, right? So I think satellite images are actually invaluable in that extent of giving a very low-cost way of looking at how their policies are actually being implemented in the field and where some more tightening may need to occur. And if there's a correlation of where the cases are being reported versus where these bad implementations or enforcements are taking place, I think there would be some actionable measures that could be taken by the governments. Right. So let me stop there and not steal the thunder of everybody.
Well, thank you. No, and it's a great way to start, because we're going to come back to you and ask what satellite fleets like Maxar and its Worldview Legion fleets can do to enable some of these industries and governments to manage this crisis better. Because as we heard in the United States yesterday from our lead doctor, it's not going to go away. And so that means we need more research and obviously better tools. Which brings me over to Yasi, who works in that area. But Yasi, where are you today, and what's going on in your environment? And then tell us a little bit about Space Pharma, please.
Hi, Lou. Thank you very much for the event. Thank you, everyone on the screen. I am at Tel Aviv, actually within Space Pharma Laboratories, the R&D center, where we are developing the hardware. Around us, we start to come up out of the lockdown. Since mid-March, we have been in a kind of a quarantine lockdown periods all over the country. We admire Singapore for their controlling this pandemic COVID-19 situation, and we learn a lot from many states. Actually, I was personally by early December at Singapore, and I had to flew through Milano, and then I spent few days or almost a week at Switzerland, and then back to Israel. So I can tell you that I traced all the COVID-19 regions all over the world, and I felt a disaster for about 3 weeks. I thought I am sick, but my physician told me that I am under a severe flu for respiratory lungs disease or something similar. I was coughing. I thought I'm going to die. But apparently, I had some friends in Germany who sent me some COVID-19 detectors, which I used at my house. And I recognized that I never had even a small, antibodies within my blood, no IAG, no IgG, so I probably had a flu. But It's very similar to the symptoms that we are experiencing all over.
Yeah, well, so, I never thought I'd congratulate somebody for only having the flu, but I'm glad to hear that. But you can understand the fear of the COVID. But you're in the right field. We're going to be looking at a video later in the program here from Space Pharma. But just can you tell us in a few words, for those who may not know, or for some of our academic viewers, what Space Pharma does?
Yeah, so since we understood that we are first of all, we are developing a miniaturized laboratory to be used in orbit, in the outer space, either within the ISS or free orbit like CubeSats and mini shuttles in the near future. Since February 2017, we have our own CubeSats in orbit, which we are going now to distribute to Asia Pacific. We are going to create pharma research lab available for Singapore, India, Australia, and all over the region. The CubeSat is a meal cartoon size. You're going to see that at the movie, and I'll show you a real one at the end. But within it, it's a big story. This is what are we using. This is a lab on a chip. This is a business card size where we are building the capillary and the reaction trail while everything is taking place in orbit. And since we understood that we need to provide something to humanity, we adopt the technology that's built for using in orbit in order to use it on Earth, on ground. We realized that there is a limitation of miniaturized system on Earth, where you can integrate hoods, microscope, flow chemistry, and of course, the COVID-19 proteins in order to try to find the molecules that can defeat it. So since then, we provide it to hospitals around the country and researchers to use it.
Very good. Well, that's making the world a better place, certainly. And thank you for that introduction. Again, we'll come back to you to get a little bit more in depth about what's capable when you're doing work like that in microgravity. I want to move to Abhishek, who can talk to us about some of the questions we're already getting about doing business in India, commercial space in India. So Abhishek, welcome. Tell us where you are, how you're doing, and then tell us a little bit about TMT law practice.
Sure. So I am very much in Delhi, and we are all, as perhaps most people would know, under a nationwide lockdown. There have been some, relaxations that have been effected from time to time. We are currently in the phase 3 of the lockdown. And there is a possibility, and it's already been announced, that we will go down to the phase 4 as well. We do not currently know how long phase 4 is likely to last. And we also do not know what further relaxations, if any, are likely to come about in that phase. But everyone is expecting that there will be few more relaxations compared to phase 3, where we are already allowed to move out between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And we are allowed to run private offices with 33%, 1/3 strength. Of course, essential services are running, full steam and to support wherever that's required. TMT law practice, I think you've given a fair introduction of where we're from. We're a boutique firm, as the name suggests, in the technology, media, telecom sector. The marriage of telecom and the technology is such that, it propelled us to get into the SATCOM and the aerospace sector fairly early on, and be able to advise on policy, regulatory issues, try and create a map of what really is the current situation, how we can contribute in terms of the policy dialogue in improving the circumstances to get in more private participation in strengthening the government's already great efforts with ISRO and the like. So I think, the topic for today's session is fairly timely. And I think given the fact that we've had some announcements from the government, both on the economic side and certain aspects that, would address specifically the pandemic, I think it's fairly timely that we are having this discussion, and we'll be happy to sort of contribute more during the course of the discussion on the specific initiatives of the government and where they need to do a little more and to tie in with whatever is already going on to achieve the objective that we want to achieve.
Oh, that would be very good. Just quickly though, Abhishek, is it your sense, being there in Delhi, that this event, COVID, has maybe prompted the government and policymakers and others to think we might want to fast forward our commercial industry because there are things it can do for civil society that we've been thinking about, but now maybe it's time to unleash it?
So I think the message from the government, because there has been, the concentration of the messaging has actually been more around what they can do to alleviate the suffering, more, both at the management of the pandemic from a healthcare standpoint, as well as, because of the lockdown, the impact on the economy as such. So I don't think there has been a specific thought, or there's no communication specifically, I would say, which would perhaps, allow me to answer the question directly. However, I think there are 2 or 3 green shoots, if I can call them, which would gives us the indication that there is when the lockdown is opened up and when there is a greater amount of possibility of participation and dialogue, we may be able to piece little bits together to try and get that out of the government. So just for example, there has been some time since when the TMT law practice, in conjunction with the Telemedicine Society of India, has been pushing for at least a structured set of guidelines, so that for the medical practitioners who already are a little scared of medical legal issues and being taken to court, they should have some sort of a roadmap of what exactly they need to do in order for them to practice medicine through use of technology. Not necessitating an in-person consultation, but very often communicating the medical advice over technology. And this is most important for the far-flung areas which cannot get timely access to healthcare infrastructure. So while that was the pitch early on, with COVID hitting us all, and as everyone knows, no one was really prepared for this. That really led the Board of Governors, who are going to take over the Medical Council of India, to expedite these regulations, and we're very thankful that a lot of the stuff that we've contributed on, and where we sort of taken the best practices from the States, from Europe, were incorporated in a reasonably clear document with flow charts and indicators exactly as to what needs to be done. So I think once that and there's a push that there is a need for training 500,000 doctors in as short a span of time as possible,
Right.
so that this can really become a reality very, very quickly. And there have been webinars, training sessions, 2 or 3 or 4 in a day through the month of April, to try and reach the information out to as many people as possible that this is already a reality. Please start practicing it. Yeah. So once that does happen, you need support, you need infrastructure, you need technology, you need platforms to do that. And that's where I think that satellites are really going to help out. And
yeah, that's fascinating. Madhav, that's sort of almost a walking commercial for Maxar. Here in the United States, over the last, I think, 6 or 7 weeks, I don't remember the exact time frame, 80% of doctors' visits in the United States have been through telemedicine, which is great, but it's put an enormous amount of pressure on the infrastructure. And of course, we keep telling people satellite. This is why you need that infrastructure that Abhishek was talking about. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because healthcare keeps civil society intact. We're having discussions now about the importance of essential workers, people who actually show up for really hard jobs, and the role to which, again, picking up from Abhishek, satellite now can be a little bit more prominent in keeping people healthy and keeping civil society running as we move through what looks to be a 2-year crisis.
Yeah. I think that's a nice segue. And if you think about, some of the traditional ways in which work was carried out, right? And I'm going to take, a specific example, like a gas pipeline or electric utility transmission towers with wires hanging off, throughout the country, right? We didn't have much of an alternative, but to actually send out crews out there to check that everything was okay, and if there was something that needed to be fixed, they needed to go and do that. But organizations are starting to discover that a lot can be done using the monitoring aspects of satellites, right? Because now you're able to have revisits of the satellites at least 2 times a day. But you alluded to Legion, and that's what is really exciting about Maxar, because come the first quarter of 2021, we're going to start the launch of the Legion constellation of satellites. And when we are done with the final launch in the third quarter of next year, that would mean that we would have a total of 6 Legion satellites up there. And what that would mean is that we would actually increase the revisits to be up to 15 in a day, right? That's from sun up to sundown. So, effectively you've got, if you've got 12 hours, then every hour you're likely to get a revisit, of the same location. Now think about what that, if you're looking, to monitor whether it is the pipelines and the transmission towers, of the enterprises, that you don't really need the people to be out there anymore. Or if you're looking at some of the safe distancing kind of measures that you had taken, how are those actually playing out, on the countryside in particular, right? And if you might have issued a, stop work order, but is that really being practiced, in the rural parts of the countries, et cetera, can easily be monitored. And the nice part about this Legion constellation is that we're going to be doing that with 30 centimeter resolution, right? And if you use the high definition techniques, you can actually get that to be 15 centimeter resolution as well. So it's very, very high quality satellite images where you can easily discern whether Madhav is actually reading a newspaper or a book in the park, right? So it is going to be that crystal clear from that standpoint. So yeah, the use cases are going to be amazing.
It really is. And I'm thinking about the Gates Foundation, which was very articulate about GPS satellites having been vital to them eradicating polio in India and other parts of the world, because they were able to track whether groups of people were moving away from clinics or toward clinics for vaccination. This seems to take it to a whole other level in terms of providing qualities of service.
Right. So what we have done is we've kind of started to release out the Maxar's open data program, right? So we've got data sets, for various cities, right, in Africa and, across the world. And we are now accepting requests from all over the world for us to provide more and more of those data sets. And, those data sets are being provided for free with the understanding that if they were going to, develop those for further use, they will be able to contribute some of those new insights back to this open data program. So that's going very well. Since we had a webinar a month ago, there've been a ton of requests from all parts of the world. So very interesting to see how the take-up is moving along.
It really is. And I had a chance to moderate a panel with your CEO, Dan Jablonski, in Washington, and he was very excited about the Legion fleet because of, among other things, its capability to provide 3D imaging of cities and communities, which are going to help us do the types of things that build resilience. But also, Yasi, building resilience means innovation. It means the pharmaceutical community is going to have to take a giant leap. I'm guessing we agree on that.
Absolutely.
What are the benefits of microgravity in helping us achieve what in our administration in Washington, I'm sure the Indian administration, Singapore administration, and Israeli government are saying is the #1 goal right now, creating new vaccines and accelerating the way we can make people healthy. Is there any advantage that you guys have seen?
Yeah, so I'm watching now on the screen, on my big screen, about our 5-year prediction, where is the market is going. And from 2018 to 2024, top 5 are oncology, anti-diabetics, anti-traumatics, and then the 4th and the 5th positions are for vaccines and antiviral drugs.
Yeah. What was the third?
Oncology is way above.
What was the third? The third was what again?
The third is anti-rheumatics. Rheumatics look like rheumatics within bones and
Got it.
stress.
Thank you.
So you see that number 1, 2, and 3, actually oncology is it's like double than the other or triple. But I do see that this table is going to change dramatically. First of all, antiviral drugs are going to take the giant leap. I think it will be the second after oncology, maybe even close to oncology. And the vaccine, of course, due for COVID-19. Hopefully someone will find a vaccine for this virus. I do expect that to jump also to number 2 and 3. But if we will aggregate vaccine and antiviral together, definitely oncology is going to be the second place for the first times since a century. And this is a big change. It's a big change because we never we never define new tools, we never used microgravity appropriately to try and to defeat high throughput screening. We know that bacteria are very aggressive when you put them in orbit, and no one checked the vaccine at all. But if you break down the coronavirus to its proteins, you easily know that if you detect 2 or 3 proteins within the virus and you kill those proteins, you kill the virus. Now, a virus cannot survive without a cell. It must have a mammalian cell. Otherwise, it's something in the air, right? So if we will be able to take the virus and to use space as a clinical, let's say clean room stage 4, we can protect our life here on Earth, because many viral attacks most probably came from a lab, from scientists who did not pay attention to security levels. And if you will be able to use space as, outside the atmosphere, as the freedom to operate, easy to access, without risking our humanity here, we can use space as a, football field, right? We can play there.
Right. Right. Well, I'd rather us develop a vaccine there than have a Notre Dame football game right now. But I think that's a terrific observation. I'm going to go to Abhishek in a moment to ask him about those ideas and how they might play out on a regulatory basis in India and whether there's a commercial opportunity there. But you know what I wanted to do, Yassi, with your permission? I just wanted to show people who may not be familiar with space pharma a little bit of a video that was put together just to give people a sense of what you guys are doing, because you're kind of the new entrant to the field here. Can we do that?
Sure, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Beautiful music, by the way, as well. Thank you for letting us show that. Abhishek, I'm going to move to you. You know, that type of innovation, moving itself into a commercial sector, can be a terrific opportunity for any university cluster or any country. This is really a two-part question for you. What would be a requirement for something like this to occur now commercially in India, and what is the government there doing to support innovation and fund young and mature and exciting companies through this crisis and beyond?
So to answer your first question as to what it would take to really get this off the ground in India, to the extent that it is acting as a support function, and to the extent that it is riding on the back of technology, but it's a business in itself which is sustainable to the extent that it does not necessarily need. So I'm going to distribute this question into two parts. The first part is the business itself, and the second part is government intervention or government facilitation. So the business itself, of course, like any other business, would require maybe the necessary types of, the person's inventor's passion, the person who's leading the business to take it forward. It would, of course, need the relevant amount of investment to take shape and play it out in the industry and have of course a use case for that in the country. Because it is, pharmaceuticals in general, healthcare, all of these are heavily regulated areas. So any new sort of innovative aspect needs to go through the relevant regulatory processes of approvals that perhaps would be true maybe of any regulated country or regulated system anywhere in the world. We have greater number of regulations in India, and that's been one of the sort of banes of pushing businesses to the heights that they could achieve in a relatively less regulated environment. But what's been one point of at least, an interest or as I said, I used this word earlier, green shoot, is that in areas such as, let's say, financial technology, fintech, and, areas associated with, let's say, market-oriented aspects, the government has been forthcoming in saying that, look, till such time that we can actually create a facilitative environment whereby these ideas see the light of day in a regular way, shape, or form, let's try and create a regulatory sandbox where we allow for these ideas to be tested, to see what their efficacy is, to see what the utility is, and then we get them into the mainstream domain and push them out into the market. So I think what we are missing currently with regard to the space technology, pharma, and otherwise is this specific regulatory sandbox, which I think will really facilitate business, specifically in the private sector and, of course, in the startup domain.
And both Yasi and Madhav were nodding their heads when you talked about that regulatory sandbox. Madhav, I'm going to stay on the subject of innovation with you, but I'm going to switch sort of industries. Of course, in India, we've got Prime Minister Modi's 100 Smart Cities initiative, which we're very excited about. I'm very interested in cities. I've actually co-authored a couple of books on how technology can enable cities to go forward and become more intelligent. I know you're passionate about this as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the ultimate, I think, form of resilience, which is satellite data supporting mayors and governors and prime ministers and presidents to make more data-driven policy when it comes to healthcare, construction, zoning, water systems?
Yeah, no, I think, absolutely. And we alluded to that earlier when I was talking about the 15 times repeat, right? So if you look at it from an urban planning standpoint, whether they need to build new roads, expand the existing roads or not, some of the criteria that governments typically use is to try and figure out the average speed at different times of the day of the vehicles and say, in Singapore, I know that if it falls below 40 kilometers per hour, that means that that road is not, that highway is not moving as fast as it should. So they should be looking at, providing additional lanes or additional means for the commuters to move. So all of that's very interesting now, because you could actually do that, vehicle count and all of that using satellite images and combining that with AI and ML, right? Similarly, if you're looking at, the traffic junctions and trying to figure out the number of vehicles going from left to right versus north to south, etc., you could actually use the satellite image data to be able to do a lot of the vehicle counts without needing to embed the roads with sensor loops, which you can only do so much within the confines of a city. So all the use cases that we were used to thinking about from a smarter city standpoint before are going to be completely revolutionized, as to how you would be able to do that with these high definition 30 centimeters or better satellite images with almost 15 times repeat in a day. It's a very different way of looking at it. And the only challenge that cities have is, can they really cope with so much of satellite image data that comes their way, or would they need the smart startups to come in and consume that satellite image data and just give them the insights that they can actually go do something about, right?
Well, yeah, and that's a great point, because we've got a lot of data analytics companies that have formed for that specific purpose, and we've got a bunch of questions, actually, one for you on that subject. But I also want to ask you just one final question on that. You noted a transportation related or environmental related application. Now, would that be part of a policy that the Department of Transportation would undergo? And secondly, do you envision now a more holistic view where the environmental and sustainability aspect ties to Yassi's, pharmaceutical industry, and it also ties to Abhishek's legal framework? Are we going to be thinking more holistically now?
Absolutely. So, the way I would talk about that is, the cities is where you actually get to realize the system of systems concept, right? It's not just the utilities, it's not just the drainage and sewage, it's not just the transport, but it's how they interoperate with one another is what culminates in whether the city really works or not, right? So I think the system of systems concept comes in really nicely at a city's level. And I think using satellite data and using that in a very timely manner will allow city authorities to make those rapid decisions across this multifaceted system of systems kind of a scenario.
Abhishek and Yassi, before I go to questions, do you guys want to add anything to that comment?
I would like to say something related to the efficiency of using space. So first of all, synthesis of molecule in orbit are much competitive to any synthesis here on Earth, but much more unique. Not many of us are aware about it, and we should try this domain in order to provide better health, better medicine, better food here on Earth. Second thing is that we suffered from the COVID-19 because we had been on a launcher known as the Vega at French Guiana, and we were evacuated this base launch site on March 20, I think 3rd or 4th, and now we are back to the same launch site. But the cost of sending a crew to a launch site increased dramatically because we had to evacuate and to put in a lockdown about 80 people.
Oh, you went on mute, Yassi. You're on mute.
To be aware that can meet us again someday or one day, but it's increased the cost dramatically.
There's no insurance on that and anything you could activate?
I was advised with the insurer. We are the first satellite, the CubeSat, that is insured. The insurers claims that due for the French president, this is a force majeure, so no one is allowed to claim remedies or damages. So this is our big, we have a legal advisor here, right? Avishak.
I was just looking, we've got a great lawyer here. Maybe he has a comment on that.
No, so just to summarize, there were two aspects that I just wanted to quickly touch upon. The first was something that Yossi was talking towards the end about the increased cost of sending a team to help out with the final formalities of the launch, etc. And I was only earlier today reading an article about the need for a greater amount of automation in both in the pre-launch and the post-launch sort of scenario. And that's another area where a push from the government and the facilitative environment for startups could really help in assisting that kind of a domain to really take off. And as we, very clear example here and now, in that sort of a situation, perhaps we may have been able to achieve what Yossi wanted to achieve at a fraction of the cost. That's the first thing. The other one is, I think, just before signing off, I wanted to say that, just continuing from what Madhav also was saying, this today is perhaps one of the greatest opportunity for the government of India to show its intent, whether it's by way of a regulatory sandbox or otherwise, to actually, make use of the various facilities that the cutting edge startups are able to provide. Because today it is that the government of India has to provide a basis to not only see whether it's the policies that it is seeking to implement to get the country out of the COVID crisis are actually taking shape. Is the economic stimulus that is supposed to reach the last mile, that is supposed to impact the people who are really getting affected by the loss of their livelihoods on a regular basis, is it actually reaching them? Are the migrant laborers who are supposed to be facilitated to reach back to their homes, are they reaching there? Is the entire debate around the location tracking and the contract tracing aspect being properly implemented? Is it, when should they even take the decision of lifting the lockdown? And if so, to what extent? Should it be in a phased manner? Should it not be so? So there are so many opportunities today for the satellite and the satellite industry to come to the aid of the government of India. And I think that opportunities should be seized with open arms and set down the tone for facilitating the environment to take the space industry to the next level.
Yeah, very good. And you do need an ecosystem, and that's one of the things that's going to have to be concentrated on from a policy level. Okay, we're up on 10 minutes to the hour. I apologize. It's gone so well. We've ignored the audience's questions. I'm going to bring Tamara Bond-Williams in from the SSPI International office. Tamara, I know there's been some questions, so why don't you just read one out and direct it to our speakers appropriately.
Sure. So we actually have one question from the audience. This is from Aditya. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly, Sharma. And he asked a question about recognizing that most people know that in India, there are no private companies that are preparing satellites all their own. What steps are being taken to increase the number of private companies doing that, and how to get proper resources for that effort?
So,
Abhishek, I guess, or Madhav.
At either of Madhav or me. I think Madhav, why don't you take the first shot? I'll step in just to support.
Sure. I think it's an interesting question, but even Singapore has embarked on setting up their own satellites, etc. But I think more crucial and more pressing need for India is to actually take a look at their RSDP policy, right? The one that's so famous, the remote sensing data policy by the government of India, which actually mandates that all satellite image data needs to go through NRSC, and that actually becomes a bottleneck in terms of how fast does do the customers actually get access to all this data, right? So I think there are more pressing problems that government of India can actually look at in terms of opening up that policy and making that existing satellite data from even the overseas commercial vendors to be made available in a very quick, timely fashion. That is not happening today, and that I think is a huge concern for me as I look at starting up the innovation ecosystem in India.
Just to add to that, because of the fact that I do get to interact a lot with the startups in this ecosystem, I'd just like to add that it is a very dynamic and very vibrant ecosystem. Of course, the kind of work that has already been done by ISRO and the government has been fantastic up until now. And one of the reasons why there is that ecosystem of vibrancy in that ecosystem till now is because these businesses get to provide a lot of the support services for actually enabling the country or ISRO to reach where it has. But to my mind, the time is very ripe for such companies to get a little more than what has currently been given to them. Faster pace in getting approvals, greater autonomy in deciding which way do they want to go in terms of the roadmap of their businesses. And I think I think this has been said very often, and it's partly ties into what Madhav just said with regard to the remote sensing policy, is that like the government did with computers, like it did with telecom, like it did with broadcasting, perhaps the time is ripe for the government to exit being the regulator, the licensor, the competitor, all rolled into one. Perhaps it is time when the industry needs its independent voice and it needs that ecosystem to really take off and demonstrate what it is capable of.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Two very, very quick questions, because we really are unfortunately out of time. But Madhav, is Maxar doing anything to support startups in the data analytics area? Because you had mentioned, yes, there's an overflow of data coming into cities. So we need good data analytics capabilities on the ground. Does the company actually do anything for startups there, encourage them?
No, absolutely. So we do have, a big data analytics platform, which we call as GBDX, which is actually being used, by organizations to, come in with their AI, ML algorithms, look at the archive data, look at the fresh tasking data that's coming through from XR, and come up with, nice applications that can then be rolled out without actually having to incur huge amounts of costs, because they actually get to pay on a cloud-based usage model. So very, very attractive for the startups to come and work with us in that area. So yeah, there's lots of, very nice, innovative startups that are starting to look at that area.
Very good. Yasi, last question to you in terms of startups and innovations, because you're a startup. Is there the type of ecosystem in Tel Aviv and Israel overall that allowed you to do the types of things you're doing? Did you get that kind of support, or was it coming from outside? And could you export it to India, that type of model?
Right. So first of all, the ecosystem in Israel related to space is, to new space actually, is growing nicely. I cannot say dramatically because we have a lot of cyber and other activity, but the government is supporting such developments, mostly if those are cutting edge technologies like space pharma. I can tell you that we are relying on investors and government support. So we are playing. Sometimes the government the government can support more, sometimes less, and we need to modify it with money coming from investors, and that's what are we doing. And this is a very unique technology, which I can tell it's creating and building a pillar, a vertical market. What we're experiencing right now, it's a big change for the ecosystem of all the logistic chains. Factories at the east cannot transport to the west or vice versa. Ships are not shipped, and airliners are rarely flying. So at Space Pharma, we recognize that any state that holds a launcher capability as an infrastructure will be able to launch a lab in orbit and to create free orbit industrial zone. So a LEO industrial zone. And if we will be able to land back to the same region, we can prohibit all the risks of being, export and import issues related to regulations, related to industry, and related to consumers. And that's what we are building here. India is a perfect fit to this activity because they have launcher, the PSLD. They have a unique, big environment of it's a huge market that can work with Singapore as a distribution channel using the Changi airport, right? The busiest one in the world, and to disseminate these products to all over the region of Asia Pacific.
There's a vision for another hour of conversation. Thank you for that. And so what you heard is that your industrial zone and your supply chain now will be up in space, and you don't have to worry about whether you have good relationships with Mexico or Brazil or somebody else. Again, the space and satellite community is way ahead. Gentlemen, we're out of time. I really want to thank you for what for me was a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for showing up today. And I know you're busy, so it means a lot to us. Thanks again to the US-India Business Council and our new SSPI India chapter. We hope that you and others will become a regular participant of all of their future events and participate and be active in the chapter. It's good for your business. It's good for your knowledge base. A promotional item: on December 7th, SSPI will host its annual Better Satellite Worlds Award dinner in London, as we do every year. It will be, we will gather many of the UK's leading space and satellite leaders from throughout that part of our universe. You'll meet people like the three gentlemen today. You will celebrate companies and people who have used satellites as they have to truly make a better world. And you can nominate a company for that award, including your own company, by visiting sspi.org. I'd like to just thank the corporate patrons of Space and Satellite Professionals International for their ongoing support. To learn more about us, follow us on Twitter at SSPI and check us out on LinkedIn and Facebook. For our guests today, for Space and Satellite Professionals International, our producers Tamara Bond and Matt Owen, and our 3,000 members and chapters worldwide, I'm Lou Zaccarella. Let's go out and make it a better satellite world. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry we kept you a little long.
No problem.
No problem.
That's all.
That was terrific.